It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Something really unique happened in the first quarter of this year. We actually had negative GDP growth. And so naturally, whenever we see our first quarter, people start using the R word. Is this a recession? Is a recession coming? So we thought it'd be valuable to define for you what is a recession. And very simply, a recession refers to a significant decline in economic activity. It's generally recognized as 2 consecutive quarters of decline in GDP. So if we have another quarter with GDP negative, then that technically would qualify as a recession.
Well, recession, I think, makes people get nervous because it's not just the stock market. This actually impacts financial, not the stock market, but also the housing market, the employment numbers. There's a lot of ripple effects that come when the economy's in struggling and having issues.
And one of those ripple effects that we often see is negative stock market performance. Now, I want to be clear. We're going to talk a little bit in a moment about bear markets. A bear market and a recession are not the same thing, but they often go hand in hand. And for most of us, the way that we feel recessions on a very personal level is what's going on in our portfolio, what's happening in our retirement accounts, what's happening with our army of dollar bills. And generally speaking, in recessionary times, that's often reflected in the way the market performs, which sometimes turns into an actual bear market.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the positive side. When markets are up from the bottom, 20%, that's a bull market.
That's a bull market.
We all like those. Those feel great. You feel like a genius while you're investing and making that automatic money. However, when markets from the peak lose 20%, that's considered a bear market. What is interesting is that you don't have to have a recession to have a bear market, but it is interesting when you look at the numbers that recessions are an indicator that bear markets are right around the corner.
So we thought, okay, if we want to think about this in the context of have we been here and have we done this before, it's interesting not just to look at this current year's trading activity or where we are year to date, but this is a great piece put out by First Trust. You've seen us use this before, and it shows the history of bear markets and the history of bull markets here in the U.S. dating all the way back to 1942. And so for those of you out there listening on Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, what this shows is how long the average bull market lasts and how severe it is or how good it is, how frothy it is. And it shows how long the average bear market lasts and how severe the decline is. Well, if you can see the picture on the screen, these two are not the same.
Yeah, I mean, let's give some information here for the people who don't have the visual also. I told Daniel, I was like, I wish we could highlight this, so I'll just read it to everybody. The average bull market period lasted 4.4 years with an average cumulative total return of 155%.
That is stellar. So if you think about it, your money is more than doubling over the course of about 4.5 years. That's pretty exciting.
So that's the average length, and that's the average rate of return that you get out of bull markets going back to 1942. Now look at the bear market, the negative side of this. The average bear market period lasted 11.3 months.
That's
not years. That's not even a full year. That's 11.3 months with an average cumulative loss of 32.1%.
And so 32.1%, that sounds painful. That's a big drawdown. That's not a comfortable thing. But when you think about that in the context of a bull market that makes 155% over 4.5 years, it just doesn't seem quite as bad as you might think or as the media might make it seem.
So I love how this slide gives a lot of context because I want you guys to know the good is so much more powerful and happens so much more often than the bad that we wanted to come up with how do you handle the bad, because one of the best things is one thing to tell you, hey, it's going to be good, just hang in there, but I know it emotionally hurts. It pulls all these behavioral things where you feel like react. What do I need to be doing to cope with the losses I'm seeing on my financial statements, on my net worth statement? I'm seeing this stuff all over social media. We actually, and Bo, I want to give you credit for this. He said, look, I think we just have to go with it. I mean, when people are stressed out, the first thing you can tell them, and this is going to be a little bit of a contrarian take here, Bo came up with have a drink.
Yeah, sometimes when things are uncomfortable from the financial world, we have to take a drink. We have to step back. We wanted you guys to have a very easy way to remember this, an easy way to think of this. And it's basically a 5-step process to prepare yourself for the next recession if that's coming. And here are the 5 steps, and then we'll dive in each one. do a plan assessment, recognize risk tolerance versus risk capacity, how they're different and how that impacts you, ignore the noise, notice any silver lining opportunities, and then the last thing, and possibly the most important thing, is know that this too shall pass. If you can kind of work through this 5-step process, whenever the markets freak out, whenever the economy freaks out, you're going to set yourself up most likely to be able to get through it just fine.
I mean, I like to build my quotes around things you do well, Bo.
Okay.
And the first one, D, do a plan assessment.
Yep.
And I always like this because I hear you say it with clients. I've heard you say it on some of our commentary, is that the plan we have designed for you is good before the volatility and recession or whatever we're facing comes our way, during the middle of it, and it's good afterwards.
Yep.
So that's why there's a lot of benefit to doing the plan. But I wanted to ask, where are people, what are some things they can do to make sure they're doing this right?
Well, I think the first thing that you have to do is you have to answer the question, do I have a plan in place? I think a lot of folks don't recognize, they're just kind of letting life happen. You get out of college and you start working and maybe you're saving or maybe you're not, but you haven't thought about the whys and the whats. You need to answer the question, do I actually have a plan in place? If I don't, step one would be, hey, I need to develop some sort of financial plan, some sort of way to tactically think about what I'm doing with my army of dollar bills and how I'm doing that. Well, then once you have that plan in place, you ought to think about, have things recently happened that have made me get off kilter? Perhaps did I let myself get too far out over my skis from a risk perspective, right? The markets have been performing really well. Did I start chasing some things that maybe I shouldn't have been chasing? This is a great time to really reassess that and say, okay, do I have a plan in place? And is that plan in place actually a good one?
Yeah, and think about life events too. I mean, what's going on out there? Should you update and adjust from that? And then, Bo, this is an important one, and I love it when we get feedback off of this, because one of the great things when people take listeners and everybody takes the relationship to the next level, they love when we actually do that retirement plan and we stress test it. We try to figure out, is this thing broken? And you actually put it into this. You said, hey, have you Monte Carlo'd up?
That's right. Exactly. So one of the things we want to know is it's easy for us to think about the best case scenario. I'm going to retire. I'm going to build my army of dollar bills. I'm going to retire and I'm going to sail off. I'm going to sail off into the sunset. Sailboat off into the sunset. If you have not stress tested your thing, say, well, what if I retired a bad time? I mean, a lot of the comments right now coming in are, hey, is now a good time to retire? Should I postpone it? One of the ways that you can go into this with some security, and we do this for our clients, is by doing a Monte Carlo scenario on your portfolio. If I have this much money and I'm planning on doing these types of things and I want to spend this level of money and I have this type of income and I'm going to live for this long and I want to assume this type of return, and I run through different iterations of those variables, what's my probability of success? That even if I get unlucky and I retire at the worst time in the worst market with the worst stuff going on, do I have a high probability of success I'm going to make it through that? If you've not stress tested your portfolio, or if you stress tested it but you've not revisited it, now might be a really good time to do that, to assess, is the plan that I have in place still the best plan for me?
Yeah, that's why when you're younger and you're just creating the napkin plan, you can use the 4% withdrawal rate. You can do all kind of simple back of the napkin type stuff. But as you do get closer, like I say, when you're within 5 years of retirement, this is a very valuable tool that's going to give you the peace of mind to know that you can handle whatever is coming your way. And then the last thing on this point I would point out is just your cash management. Do you have cash reserves? Are you actually taking into account, because that's what's going to get you through any volatility you might be facing, is if you have the cash, you have the liquidity, so that you're not facing this as an emergency of, oh my goodness, how am I going to pay the bills?